Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves postcast. We're live following the Wolves lost to the Milwaukee Bucks. And with Tyler Metcalf of Canis Supis, we're going to break the whole thing down next. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Wolves postcast, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves postcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of the daily podcast Locked On Wolves, hosting the postcast here tonight with Tyler Metcalf from Canis Supis. We're going to break down Wolves Bucks, the first game out of the All-Star break. And Tyler, this was something of, we'll call it a tale of two halves for the Wolves. They played really well for, the first half they played well. They were up, I think, 6 at halftime, and they had a furious comeback in the fourth quarter. The third quarter is kind of what did them in, but a little bit of an up and down with I guess a catastrophic third quarter, we'll call it, in the first game out of the break here.
Yeah, and first quarter was a little clunky. It felt like they kind of came out a little tight. They were coming up short on a lot of their shots, but the energy was there on both ends of the court, and that really reflected where I think they had 7 first quarter offensive rebounds, which was huge. Second quarter, they loosen up a little bit and pull out, they end up outscoring the Bucks by 10. It really just comes down to that third quarter where they abandoned all of their offensive principles. Their ball security was sloppy. They started playing hero ball and just hunting home run shots. And they had an awesome comeback in the fourth and really made it interesting. But that third quarter was just way too much to overcome by the end of the game.
Yeah, and I guess we can rewind a little bit and talk about you mentioned the clunky first quarter, and that's the best way to describe it, because at the end of the day they were only down 4 at the end of the first quarter, but it wasn't smooth. They were down 7-0 to start the game. Brook Lopez went nuts early in the game. The Wolves just kind of strayed a little too far off him. I think he made his first 4 threes. And then Jaden McDaniels guarding Giannis picks up 2 and actually eventually 3 quick personal fouls and is kind of a non-factor in the first half. Kyle Anderson starts guarding Giannis. Giannis, as Giannis does, gets to the line a billion times throughout the course of the game. But on offense, it was also a rough start. So combining that with the kind of shaky start defensively, they were down 4 at the end of the first quarter, and then the bench comes in and plays fantastic in the second quarter. Nickeil Alexander-Walker hits a bunch of threes. Naz Reid hits a big 3. The Wolves take a little bit of a lead, and then all of a sudden, I would say, there was a stretch kind of early mid-second quarter where the Wolves strung multiple really genuinely impressive defensive possessions together. Not like that's anything unusual for this year's Wolves team, but it was a complete contrast from what we saw in the third quarter of this game. It was like the first half of the second quarter. And of course, the other side of it was the Wolves for that same stretch were not scoring, on their end of the floor. So it stood out less because it was like neither team was scoring. But for a while in the second quarter, it was complete lockdown defense for Minnesota. They were on a string. It was basically a Rudy plus bench lineup early in the second quarter that did this. But it was a nice bounce back from what, like you said, was a very clunky first quarter.
Yeah, I think the play that really stands out, I'm pretty sure it's from the second quarter, was that just scramble that they had. Yeah, it's like the 9:35 mark that ends up in a Rudy Gobert block. I think it is on a Damian Lillard floater, but everyone on defense was making 2, 3, 4 rotations, closing out, running shooters off the line, forcing guys to drive and kick, and everyone just was in sync with each other, and they were just really just cued in. And it was like, okay, this is the defense we've seen all season, and now they're really finding their groove and their footing in this game, and this is something that they can continue to build on. And it looked like that going into halftime as they outscored the Bucks by 10 in that second quarter. And a lot of that just holding the Bucks, who have been one of the most prolific offenses in the league, to just 20 points in the second quarter was huge. And a lot of it was because of that defensive activity, that connectivity where everyone's kind of working well off of each other and executing their assignments to perfection. And we just didn't see that carry over into the third, which is really, really rare for this team, who has been awesome in the bulk of third quarters this year.
Yeah. And the Wolves did score 30 points in the second quarter. It was their best. I guess they ended up scoring 37 in the fourth because of their furious comeback toward the end. But for stretch of the second quarter, I think they only had 2 turnovers for the quarter as a whole, but it just felt like the offense still wasn't really on track, really at any point in this game until very late when Ant hit a couple of tough threes. Cat hit a couple of tough threes as the Wolves got back into the game after trailing by as many as I think 17. But for the first 3 quarters, including the second, when they played such good defense, the offense never really felt like it was all that smooth. They ended up turning it over 13 times, which is, a palatable number. But it was just kind of the flow, the spacing at times. It almost felt like stretches very early in this season, or even going back to last year where it was like, you'd look up and all of a sudden like Rudy and Kat and Kyle Anderson would like all be kind of clumped together. It just felt a little bit like the first game out of the All-Star break, like a team that hadn't played in 8 days. Not like that's an excuse because neither had the Bucks, but there just wasn't continuity to the offense. There wasn't flow to the offense. And, neither star in Karl Anthony Towns or Anthony Edwards really ever got going until it was probably a little bit too little too late in the fourth quarter. But they were part of the problem in terms of just lack of flow throughout the first 3 quarters.
Yeah, you mentioned the turnovers and the end result, 13 on paper. It's fine, especially since we're used to seeing that number jump up, to almost 20, if not more in certain games this year. So 13 against kind of a long, lengthy, kind of chaos-inducing Bucks defense, which hasn't been good this year. But the real problem from those turnovers was that they lost the points off turnover margin 20-6. So it's not just that they were turning it over an acceptable amount of time. They were mostly live ball turnovers that then immediately resulted in a bucket at the other end. And a lot of that came in the third quarter where, Ant would just have a lazy pass across the middle of the floor that Beasley picked off and took it the other way. Giannis had a couple. It was just gifting them points. So, not all turnovers are created equal, but their turnovers tonight, 13 on its own, not bad. But when you look at how they came about them and where they came and what they immediately led to for the Bucks, that's where the real issues come to play. And it was just constant that entire third quarter.
Yeah, the Bucks had 16 fast break points. The Wolves only had 7, and that really was kind of it's like the Wolves have obviously the best defense in the league, the best half court defense, and overall this year they've been really good in transition defensively, which is a contrast to last year, right? Like last year, the transition defense was awful for Minnesota. It's been very good for most of this year, but a few of those turnovers, like you mentioned, ended up turning into like at the worst possible time when Milwaukee was ready to get out and run. And that was an issue early third quarter. Another thing that pops out if you're just looking at like box score stats is free throws in this game. Milwaukee ended up shooting 25 free throws. 25, is that right? 25 free throws. Yeah. And 21 of them were by Giannis. Yeah.
And the other 4 were Lillard. 0
I was going to say,
else.
like, I knew Giannis had 21 free throws. Then I was looking at the team stats. I was like, 25.
Yeah.
Giannis had 21. But yeah, they shot 25 free throws. 21 were Giannis. 4 were Lillard. The Wolves, who, I mean, Minnesota averages, I had it pulled up here, like, how many free throws is the Wolves average? 24 free throw attempts per game as an offense. They're top 5 in free throw rate. Minnesota shot just 13 free throws in this game. I'm not at all saying this as a critique of the officiating. I actually don't think it was all that bad in this game. I thought it was pretty fairly officiated. I just think Giannis was the aggressor. And that's kind of the story there. When you look at the free throw disparity, it was more just about Giannis being Giannis than anything else.
Yeah, I think Brook Lopez deserves just an immense amount of credit tonight for what his interior defense was, because Anthony Edwards really, really struggled with his cat and mouse kind of drop coverage. And, we still aren't seeing Ant willing to throw that lob to Rudy consistently. And Lopez's ability to stay vertical, to wall up, and take away both that lob and the drive for Edwards tonight really caused Ant a lot of issues. And he ended up with 28 points on 10 of 27 shooting, 4 of 13 from 3. 3 of those threes came in the final 2 minutes. One of those made field goals. Those 2-pointers was like one of the rare strong takes that he had in the final 3 minutes where he actually challenged Brook at the rim. But Ant just looked like he was in his head the entire time. Every time he got into the paint, he just looked unsure of what to do. And we even saw, I think it ended up in a turnover or a near turnover in the final minutes where he was in the middle of the lane and was wide open and just decided to kick it out instead of just taking a little floater or pulling up for a little jump shot there. So the presence and the impact that Brook Lopez had on him specifically, but the entire team, was incredibly impressive because Minnesota shot just 60% at the rim tonight, 36.8% below the free throw line, and 22.2% on long mid-range jumpers. They just could not buy a shot inside the arc, and a lot of that was because of Brook Lopez's presence and impact, and then the hesitancy that kind of created in Anthony Edwards's downhill attacks that have been so devastating all season.
Yeah, and halftime, Minnesota ends up 6. It feels like, it feels like I thought it was an overall, like we've talked about all the issues. So, in the first half, but given all the issues, they were still up 6 at halftime. And you kind of felt like, okay, Dame hasn't really done anything offensively. He's going to try and get going early in the third quarter. That was a primary, I would think, a primary concern of the Wolves going into the third quarter, knowing that Giannis is going to do what Giannis does, get to the line, etc. But, Dame had to get going at some point, and he did in the third quarter. The Bucks came out on fire, made a big run early in the third. And at that point, they ended up building that double-digit lead that the Wolves didn't get down closer until late. And then late again, Damian Lillard, who of course didn't play when the Wolves beat the Bucks by 20 plus a couple of weeks ago, he hits a crazy 3 at the end of the shot clock, right in front of Chris Finch on the left side of the floor, and then comes down and hits the dagger when it was a 3-point game. The Wolves correctly elect not to foul, and then Lillard hits a really difficult 2-point shot from the right side of the floor. The second half, we could talk about the Giannis threes, but Dame really, he got going, and credit, obviously he's an incredible player, but the Wolves have some of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and it's exactly what Milwaukee was hoping to get when they acquired Damian Lillard, and having that two-headed monster offensively in Giannis and Dame. And this is even without Chris Middleton. But, for as bad as Lillard looked in the first half, and he was I think started 0 of 6, had a couple bad turnovers. He was awesome in the second half of this game.
Yeah, and when you look at just his stat line too, he didn't have this overwhelming scoring or shooting performance. 8 of 23 from the field, 2 of 8 from 3.
Yeah.
90% of the time, you're like, yes, please sign me up for that for a Damian Lillard night. But like you said, in that second half, he started getting a little more aggressive and getting into the paint and attacking downhill. And that's where we saw him, the assist numbers really start to uptick for him. And he ended up with 10. And a lot of those ended up being flare outs to Malik Beasley, or little bounce pocket passes to Bobby Portis, who ended up shooting 7 of 13 from the floor. Malik Beasley, 4 of 9 from 3. So he finally found his rhythm after going 1 of 9 or 0 of 9, I believe, against the Wolves in their first matchup. So it wasn't a big scoring night for Lillard, despite an impressive stat line with 21, 10, and 9, but he really found a way to get other guys open looks because of that willingness to penetrate and kind of collapse the defense, force the defense to move, and then find guys rotating into those open pockets. Is almost the exact inverse of what we saw from Anthony Edwards when he was attacking the paint. They both had brutal shooting nights, but Lillard still found those kind of areas on the fringes to really make an impact and elevate the rest of the offense.
Let's talk about our friends at Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. You just give your stylist your size, your budget, and your preferences. You order boxes when you want and how you want. No subscription required. Plus, they'll send you 5 just for you pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. You just keep what works and send back the rest. Your stylist always sends just right pieces, and the fit is on point. It's like they have style ESP. I don't know how they do it, but they just get you. Stitch Fix makes it also easy. I don't like to shop. They definitely save me that time and effort. You can do the same for you. Plus, you can get outfits that make you look and feel really good. If you don't love something, just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon. All right. So one of the bright spots for the Wolves in this game, and especially early, especially in the first half, when Minnesota got off to the rough start that we talked about, in the first quarter especially, was the bench. And you look at the box score, end of the game, like Nas finishes 2 of 10, 1 of 6 from 3, not a great Nas night from that perspective. Monte Morris was relatively quiet, only played 10 minutes. But especially in the first half, Nickeil Alexander-Walker was awesome. Nas was big when he first came into the game when the Wolves were struggling to get anything going offensively. And I thought he was decent on defense too early on in the game. And then actually a pretty good second half from Kyle Anderson. I thought the bench up until the late run from, basically Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards down the stretch in the fourth quarter when they were down double digits, take that out of it. It was the bench that really kept the Wolves in this game in the first half and helped them build that halftime lead.
I was muted. Sorry. And I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker was the real kind of catalyst for that. I mean, 3 of 3 from 3, 5 of 9 from the field. I mean, you look at minus 11, but that was just because of some third quarter rotation issues because of Jaden and foul trouble. But he was one of the main reasons why Dame got off to such a slow start. His ability to get over screens consistently, constantly walk that line between playing physical defense and not fouling while still getting good contests in. It was just a near masterclass in point of attack defense from him early on. And then you add in just the reliability from him all season long as that kind of outlet spot up shooter. He has been so important to this rotation. Just looking at the minutes, 15 feels really low for him tonight. It feels like that should be a little closer to 20 based on how he was playing, but I thought he was really impressive, especially in that second quarter.
Well, and especially when you consider Jaden McDaniels was in all that foul trouble early, and it also didn't play that well anyway. Like there was a shot that Jaden had, I think it was during the third quarter kind of onslaught from Milwaukee, where it was like, he went like 2 on 4 and shot like a 12-footer. It was like the weird, and like Richard Jefferson made a comment on the broadcast, like, I don't hate that shot, just not during this run. And it's like, no, that's never a good shot. Like that's, and I know Jaden's been really good from like inside 10 feet with that little floater, kind of like floater fade that he shoots. But that shot at that point in time was not good. Like it was a bad Jaden McDaniels game and a really good Nickeil Alexander-Walker game. Not like their minutes are like always, they don't always match up to 48 because of the positions they play in, the lineups they play in, but it was just a little bit weird to have Jaden play. And Kyle Anderson played well and he played 29 minutes. So that's part of it. But, and Monte Morris, this is something interesting that just kind of a side note to monitor. Like he didn't see the floor until the start of the second quarter. No idea, what Chris Fit, like, I'm pretty sure that between the trade deadline and the break, Morris was still seeing the floor late in the first quarter. Like it was weird. It was like Nickeil Alexander-Walker played the last 4 minutes of the first quarter, essentially at point guard. And then Morris came in to start the second quarter. He never really got into a rhythm in the first half. And I don't like, I'm sure that part of it is still getting into, getting his conditioning after not playing hardly at all for Detroit this year, but only 10 minutes for Monte Morris, only 15 minutes for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And also the front end of a back-to-back too. Like they're going to need guys tomorrow night. I know that they just had the All-Star break, but it's still a back-to-back. So I'm curious to see what that rotation looks like on Saturday night. Overall, I mean, like we talked a little bit about the offense and the struggles that the Stars had. I guess let's talk specifically about Anthony Edwards. Ant's line ended up not all that bad. A lot of that was because he hit a couple tough threes late, but I mean, 28, 9 and 5, only 3 turnovers, 28 on 26 shots. I mean, you can handle that. Like in general, it was just a weird kind of, and I thought he was engaged defensively and overall pretty good defensively. On offense, he just was missing shots. It was more that than anything else. I actually don't think his shot selection was all that bad in this game. What was your take on Ant's performance overall?
It just felt like one of those rare ones that we get every now and then from him where he just looks indecisive on what he wants to do. Because the shot from outside looked really flat all night up until those last 2 minutes. Which is weird because you just played a full game. Why are you getting more elevation on your shot now? But whatever. I don't know. There were a couple threes in like that third quarter where he started hunting and playing hero ball, and it's like, come on, man! Like, what are we doing? Like, move the ball, cut, get more than one pass in a possession, and maybe get the shot clock past the 17-second mark. And it was just a really indecisive rim pressure game from him, and we just haven't seen that from him in a while. That 5-6 game stretch before the All-Star break where the offense was really kind of firing. A lot of that was because of his ability to attack the lane and then just make the right decision every single time. Either aggressively get to the rim, draw a bunch of fouls, or hit those kickouts to corner shooters. And we just didn't see him find that groove, find that rhythm, find that comfort level tonight. And it was. I just still think it's a huge testament to the impact that Lopez had on the defensive end for the Bucks tonight.
All right, we'll wrap it up here with a couple more. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. So overall for this game, like if we're talking big picture takeaways, I don't know that there's a whole lot other than the clunky offense that continues to kind of rear its ugly head. And weirdly enough, like usually, like if we're talking really big picture, something I've talked about a lot that Wolves recently is turnovers. Yes, they've been an issue. But you can overcome turnovers being an issue. Something I talked about, I can't remember which day this week on the show, was like the Warriors, when they won the title 2 years ago, they actually had a higher turnover rate than the Wolves this year. They were like 29th in the league in turnover rate for a different reason, right? Because the Warriors play super fast. They, the way they pass the ball, like turnovers are kind of baked in. With the Wolves, it's kind of being indecisive in the half court, like you talked about with Ant. I think it's more, it's like they have these weird lapses, where it feels a little like the very early stages of this year and some parts of last year where Ant gets indecisive, the spacing gets weird. But overall, like their shot profile is good. Their actual shooting is very good. Effective field goal percentage. They're third in the league in 3-point percentage. They get to the line a bunch. So I'm not overall all that worried. I feel like the offense has been trending in the right direction. And I feel like this is just as much a function of Milwaukee playing hard coming out of the break for their new coach, because they realized they failed him in the 10 games before the break. And they actually have decent defensive personnel with Lopez and Giannis, or really good defensive personnel outside of Dame, really. So I think it's a combination of that. Plus the Wolves had a bit of rust after the break. I would expect they'll play a lot better Saturday. But are there anything that surprised you or big picture takeaways from this one that you would say like, hey, let's keep an eye out for this? Or was it just kind of more of some of the same issues mixed in with facing a really good, I mean, it's not like they were playing the Hornets, right? Like they played a really good team. So I guess what's your, overall takeaway from this one?
I'm kind of like you. I don't come away from this game thinking, oh my God, the first half of the pre-All-Star break was frauds. This team is cooked. I think that's kind of absurd. Kind of like you hinted at with Milwaukee, since the All-Star game and basically all All-Star break, one of the main talking points in the NBA sphere has been Doc Rivers, and how underwhelming and just flat out bad the Bucks have been since he got hired. So all of that combined with that embarrassing loss they had against the Grizzlies before the All-Star break, you knew that they were going to come out playing really hard, and they did. And the Timberwolves, generally, I thought their effort was good tonight. I didn't think this was an effort issue tonight. It didn't look like they came out arrogant or anything like that, which we have seen from them. They couldn't buy a shot, and just some of the decision making was inconsistent. So My bigger concern, I guess, if I have one, is just how fragile this offense is when the outside shot isn't consistently falling for him. I know they ended up shooting 37% on the game, but 5 of their 13 makes were from Ant and Cat in the final, 2-3 minutes there. Before that, Ant was 1 of 9, I think, from 3. Cat was like 1 of 7. Nas finished at 1 of 3. Mike only was 1 of 2. So when that outside shot isn't really falling consistently for him, I think the yellow flag, I guess we can say, that this game may bring up is they still haven't consistently found that counter when everything isn't clicking absolutely perfectly.
The Wolves on Saturday night come back on the second night of a back-to-back at home against the Brooklyn Nets. Of course, Brooklyn just firing Jacques Vaughn. And I believe they lost Thursday night, if I remember, if I saw that correctly, and will be coached by Kevin Ollie, former Timberwolf Kevin Ollie, on Saturday night at Target Center. The Wolves beat the Bucks beat the Nets earlier this year in Brooklyn. It was an ugly game. It was a 96-94 final. The Wolves kind of had to hold on. They had a big second quarter, but other than that, weren't very good in this game. If memory serves, it was like they kind of just hung on at the end of the game, and that was kind of it. There were a couple nice lines in the box score, but it was just kind of a slog of a game. And I mean, Brooklyn's they've been disappointing. They weren't expected to be world beaters this year, but they were certainly expected to be better than 21-34. This is a team that, the Wolves should win, even though it's on a back-to-back. The Brooklyn gets up. I think the main concern for me in this matchup quickly is they get up a lot of threes. They shoot fairly well from outside the arc. They're also a pretty good offensive rebounding team, which is, have been issues for the Wolves at times this season. Obviously still a game the Wolves should win. I guess putting you on the spot a little bit with this matchup, but anything kind of that jumps out at you about the Nets matchup that worries you, or that, you feel like is important for the Wolves?
Yeah, and they just have a lot of length and athleticism, not necessarily size, because like Nick Claxton is their starting center. He's obviously big, but not traditional center big. So this should be a game where the Timberwolves yet again kind of dominate in the post. They kind of get back to their roots of attacking the paint, attacking the rim, finding Rudy on those kind of backdoor lobs, and punishing drop defenders when they don't properly step to the ball. But the counter to that is that guys like Dorian Finney-Smith can give Cat a lot of issues. Mikal Bridges, awesome defender. Nick Claxton, awesome defender. So they do have some athleticism, some length to play with, but they've been just so disorganized this year on both ends of the floor and just fluctuate all over the place. This should be a big Timberwolves win, but we've kind of seen for the last 2 years now, the Timberwolves tend to play down to their level of competition. So it should be a physical dominant win for them, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I do think they'll win. I do think they'll bounce back. I think that what we talked about with the Bucks, playing hard right after the break was a big factor here on Friday night, with, the ESPN All Access all day and everything. I'm sure they heard enough about the Wolves and felt like, hey, let's play hard in this game. And the Wolves, had a shot there at the end as well. I do think the Nets game will be, should be a Wolves win. But as you said, like we've seen this go both ways for Minnesota. All right. That's all we have for today here on the Postcast. A big thank you for listening, or a big thank you for watching the Locked On Wolves Postcast. Of course, after Saturday night's game against the Nets, it will also be live on Locked On Sports Minnesota with the Postcast. This weekend, the audio will not be on Locked On Wolves. We're transitioning, migrating over to a different system, so the audio will not be over there, but usually it is. So check it out at Locked On Wolves. Again, the video live and after the fact on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. A big thank you for watching here tonight. Again, we go live after each and every game. We'll see you Saturday night. Have a good one.